Hey, gambling Twitter, gambling world, how you doing? We're back. How you doing? Laying the points with FarleyBets, another podcast episode coming at you. And today we are going to be discussing the NFC South and the AFC South. Little NFL division preview as we talk more and more about the upcoming 2021 NFL season, which I cannot wait for. Baseball continues to be challenging, at times very frustrating, but we'll get into my record and how things have been going there. Things are actually going really well. But before I say that, before I get into everything on the podcast today, let me remind you, please check us out at theoddsbreakers.com. Check out all of our winning handicappers on theoddsbreakers.com and on Twitter and on Instagram. I know they exist everywhere. We got Nick Hub Sports. We got Gator Betting. We got the Oddsbreaker himself at OB Kiev on Twitter or at the Oddsbreakers. And of course, myself at Chris R. Farley 1. You can also just look up at FarleyBets and I'll come right up. We've had a really good 2 weeks in baseball overall, at least from my end and my free picks that I give out at the Oddsbreakers and on Twitter. I am 20-10 over the last 14 days. That's 66.6%. For you math geniuses out there. And, winning at like a 2-1 everyday clip, something like that. Sometimes I put out less, sometimes I put out more. Baseball, as we near the end of the season, I think we can start to look at those more heavy favorites and start to fade those dogs that are really just demotivated, not always showing up. Of course, that's not the case for some of those dogs. The Rockies at home are still very dangerous. There are teams that aren't exactly primed and in contention, but are still staying in there. The Cardinals, the Athletics. A lot of teams still in contention, and they're going to be contentious. They're going to be competitive. But then you got teams like the Orioles and the Nationals. Who else? The Mets are fading quick. I don't know what's going on there. Of course, DeGrom being out doesn't help. But, I say that, and then yesterday I think 60%, 70% of the favorites lost. So baseball can always get you. It can always nip you in the ass. But here we are, still winning, 66.6% over 2 weeks. Premium picks are hitting as well. Good week so far, hitting around 60%. So, can't really complain. But I can't wait for football. I can't wait for football because it's just a sport where I feel like we have more opportunity. Derivative betting, live betting, player props, you got fantasy, futures, and obviously it all happens every Thursday, Sunday, and Monday, but mostly on Sunday. And what a day it is to just take in all the action, all the prep that you get all week to try and go against those sharp lines. Little reminder that I will be doing a podcast starting 2-3 weeks from now, right before the season starts, with my buddy Steve Norman, fellow sharp NFL handicapper who has entered the Circa Million with me. We will go over every game, every week, and our thoughts on every game and some of the picks that we're more bullish on in preparation for that Circa Million contest. Wish us luck. Say some prayers for us. Maybe we'll have a big year. We'll be taking home some cash money from the Circa Million. That'd be great. I've been very willing, but I've been wanting to join the Circa Million for a long time. So, going to be a big year, and I can't wait to talk about it with Steve throughout the season. I guess we don't have really much else to know before we get to the division previews. This is going to be a shorter podcast, I hope. I went a little bit overtime last time. I'll get to some preseason look-ahead picks that I like as well. I will actually talk about that this time. I forgot to last time. But the one thing I'll mention is it's easy to overreact in the preseason. So this is just a reminder. I can't tell you how many times I've watched a team in the preseason and I thought, damn, there's something going on with this team here. They're going to be really good this year. Remember Nick Foles in the preseason with the Eagles? They were just scoring 50 points a game, and then they had a bad season after that. I think that was pre Carson Wentz. But there's just a lot of instances where we think that we have a handle on the team, even more so after watching them in the preseason. And then we see them in the regular season, and they're just a totally different ball club. They can go 0-4, 1-3 in the preseason, or I guess 0-3 this year, and then just win their first 8 games. I mean, coaches are a little too smart and a little too savvy these days to show all their cards in the preseason. And of course, many of them historically don't give a shit about the preseason. Talking about your Sean McVays. Kyle Shanahan has a lot to test out this year, but I don't think he's a big one. Looks like Joe Judge doesn't care much about the preseason. There's just a lot of coaches out there who just don't care. And then there are coaches out there like John Harbaugh who do care. Maybe they care a little bit too much. But anyway, just don't fall into the trap of thinking that you have a great handle on a team because of what you saw in the preseason. Trust your prep. Look at what these teams did last year. Look at what's changed and what's not. Look at how they, based on those changes, how they should actually fare against their teams this year. Strength of schedule, Pythagorean theorem, strength of schedule. Just look at it all and don't base too much on the preseason, because that will 9 times out of 10 nip you in the ass. All right, guys, let's get to the AFC South and NFC South division previews. All right, let's talk first about the AFC South. And if you're going to talk about the AFC South, then you have to talk about Carson Wentz and the Indianapolis Colts, who are favored in the AFC South to win this division. And it should be a very, very interesting battle between the Titans and the Colts as the season goes on. Don't obviously see much in the Jags or the Texans this year, although I think the Jags could surprise a few people, surprise a few teams. We'll get to that a little bit later, but let's talk about the Colts. Forecasted to win 10 games this year, and I'm going to say from the jump here that I like the over. And I'm not going to say that I'm a believer in Carson Wentz, but I don't think that you can get a better overall situation for Carson Wentz. I think the guy is probably a little bit spoiled, a little coddled, needs a little more than most quarterbacks, a little bit of a diva, apparently. It didn't seem that way coming into the NFL, but he just may be a little bit. But that being said, everybody needs something different, right? And Carson Wentz reunited with Frank Reich from his glory days with the Eagles, and he's in the Midwest in a smaller market, a place where he can play in a dome. The fans are going to be rooting for him. They're not going to be brutal like those Philly fans when Carson Wentz was sucking, which I don't blame those Philly fans for being that way. But what a second chance for Carson Wentz and all of his untapped potential to actually do something on a team that is already loaded in all positions. The Indianapolis Colts are easily one of the deepest teams in the NFL, and Carson Wentz just gets to waltz right up and become a part of it. Now, the injury that he incurred looks like it's going to be something that, they were saying, like 4 to 12 weeks or something like that, which was an absurd amount of time in between to consider. But looks like he'll be back a little earlier than we imagined, so that's good news for the Colts. Although, like I said at the start of this podcast, there's a lot of depth, even at quarterback. Jacob Eason looked really good. Again, it's the preseason. Sam Ehlinger looked good. I mean, but Eason in particular made some really impressive throws in his first showing with the Colts. So we'll see. Okay, we'll see what's going to happen with the Colts in the beginning of the season and who they put at quarterback. But with the depth that this team has and the skill positions, and then Frank Reich is just a great coach. I think he's top 10 for sure. The Indianapolis Colts are looking good heading into the season, even without Carson Wentz. And before I start talking about some other things about the Colts, let me just say that the reason why I think Carson Wentz can do well above all else is because as a Giants fan in the NFC East, I have seen Carson Wentz do things that many, many quarterbacks could not do. His offensive line has not been great in the recent past, and I've seen him, like, for example, last year. The first game that I was able to go out and watch at a bar once some of the COVID restrictions started to ease was the Giants and the Eagles. And the Giants had full control of that game, should have won that game. I believe Evan Ingram in his soft ass hands dropped a perfectly thrown ball from Daniel Jones that would have gave the Giants a first down, and the Giants would have won the game. That being said, The Eagles were down 2 scores, and I watched Carson Wentz completely take over that game against a good Giants defense. The Giants were not bad on defense last year, especially in their secondary, especially against the pass. And it didn't matter. Wentz found ways to get out of the pocket. He found ways to scramble and make dime throws on the run. Completion after completion, led the Eagles to a comeback victory. Bada bing, bada boom. Now again, is it the Giants? Yes. Did the Giants famously falter a lot at the end of games? Trust me, I know. Yes. But Carson Wentz being put in a situation where there's a lot more trust, there's a lot more good vibes between him and his coach, and between him and his fan base, and probably between him and his team. It's a recipe for success for Carson Wentz. I mean, I would have loved to see this team with Andrew Luck, like this version of the team. You know, Frank Reich has had a different quarterback every year that he's been coach. Now here comes another year where he's going to have a different quarterback. But hopefully for him and for the Colts, there's some staying power with Carson Wentz if he can freaking stay healthy. My goodness. We will see what happens. But I think there is a lot more to like than there is to not like about the projections for the Colts this year. And a big part of that success is going to have to be the Colts in the second half. What do they do with their second half leads? Because over the past 3 years, the Colts have had a halftime lead more than 28 other NFL teams. Only the Ravens, Chiefs, and Saints had more halftime leads in the past 3 years than the Colts, and then the Packers come at 5th. But what does that usually equate to, obviously, is wins, right? The Ravens had 34 halftime leads in the past 3 years. Chiefs 31, Saints 30, Colts 29, Packers 28. Usually that equates to leads, but what ends up happening in the second half of a lot of these games is that the Colts tend to get a little less aggressive, right? They pass the ball first a lot in the first half, a lot of first down passing. Second half, they sit on leads, they run the ball a little more, a little too conservative. So let's see what happens with Carson Wentz. Maybe he can stretch out the field. Certainly, Phillip Rivers had his limitations last year, an old Phillip Rivers. This isn't like 2010, Phillip Rivers. They also lack a little bit of depth on offense that they used to have before. Anthony Costanza, big loss at left tackle. Veteran Eric Fisher was signed, but may not be back until mid-season with an injury. So that's a huge loss without Costanza at left tackle. We'll see how the Colts handle that at first. They're also pretty weak, in my opinion, at wide receiver. T.Y. Hilton heads the crew, but, Michael Pittman Jr., all right, he's a bigger guy. He came up a little bit last year. He looks good. Zach Pascal is their third guy. There's a D2 wide receiver that they took in the third round, Mike Strachan, not to be confused with Michael Strahan. Mike Strachan, he can make a difference. He's 6'5", so that gives him some size at wide receiver. That could be a nice addition there. And obviously they're very deep at running back, which probably the reason why they want to run the ball a lot more. Solid offensive line and very deep at running back with Jonathan Taylor, Marlon Mack, a strong 2, and then Nyheim Hines, a good pass catcher out of the backfield as well. So we'll see if this offense can catch up with the defense, because the defense has been sensational for the Colts. They caused a ton of turnovers last year, and their defense should be one of the best again. The first round, they picked up Kwity Paye, defensive end out of Michigan. Very high upside on that guy. We'll see what happens. But they have the 6th easiest schedule this year, which bodes well for them. Although the beginning is pretty brutal. 6 out of the 8 teams at the start of their season are forecasted to make the playoffs. And another thing to note is 3 out of their 4 primetime games are not at home. Colts seem to continue to get screwed in that area. As far as scheduling goes, I'm not going to make the call just yet between the Titans and the Colts. It depends on Carson Wentz's health at the beginning. There's, in those tight games in the beginning of their season where they're going to be tested a lot, you're going to need a quarterback who has experience there, who's able to hold the team in his shoulders. I think Wentz can do that. Not sure about the 2 rookies. And right now I'm more inclined to favor the Titans only because their offense has been so damn explosive. I mean, if their defense improves even just a little bit, I could see them taking over this division. So we'll see. Like I said, it's going to be a battle. I still lean over on the Colts, the over 10 wins. But it should be a battle. Let's talk about those Tennessee Titans. Interesting thing that Warren Sharp pointed out in his preview is that the real story of the Titans' success is really about Ryan Tannehill. And of course, Arthur Smith and what he did with that offense had to make a big difference as well, and now the coach of the Falcons, and we'll get to him later. But Ryan Tannehill has a great story, really the biggest difference maker for the Titans. Since he's been starting for them at quarterback over the last few years, the Titans have improved exponentially in first downs, total yards, rushing yards, points, and of course, wins. He provides that stability, and what a great story coming from Miami. Maybe, everyone thinking that his career is on a downward spiral. And he picks it back up, and he's a great fit for Tennessee, who likes to run the ball a lot, has an exceptional offensive line, and he can make the plays. He makes the plays over and over again on big third downs, keeps the ball going down the field. Obviously, Derrick Henry is a huge threat, one of the best running backs in the NFL. But in those crucial moments, Tannehill is really underrated for how he controls the game in the final 2 minutes and what he can do throughout the game on big plays. Their defense is obviously the issue here, right? I mean, if you look at their offense, in pass efficiency, run efficiency, pass explosiveness, and run explosiveness, they're ranked 4th, 3rd, 8th, and 10th in 2020, and in the top 6 in 2019 as well. So the Titans have had an explosive offense here for a while now, but the issue is defense. And they lost Malcolm Butler and Adoree Jackson. Not great. Pretty big losses. They did sign Janoris Jenkins, which, I'm on the fence about. I saw him with the Giants. Watched him jackrabbit Janoris Jenkins, and he's had some good moments for the Saints as well. But he's getting up there in age, not exactly consistent anymore. I do like them picking Caleb Farley from Virginia Tech. Very solid cornerback, very solid career. Of course, the injury issues and some of the time off could affect him, but we'll see. We'll see what old Farley, my kin, old Caleb. I should probably know how to say his name if he's a cousin of mine. He's not a cousin of mine. Anyway, the cornerback position conceivably probably going to take a step back a little bit until he develops more, unless he steps right in there and he's a boss. But we'll see. A lot out there to still figure out. Obviously, the addition of Julio Jones on their offense is huge. With A.J. Brown and Julio, oh my God, right? Just absolute monsters on the outside for the Titans. How could I not think that the Titans' offense is going to get even better with Julio there? But the biggest issue that remains is their defense. I do like the signing of Bud Dupree. We saw what he can do with the Steelers for years, although he's coming off that ACL injury. So hopefully he can get back to where he used to be, or how effective he was on the edge and how good he is at rushing the passer and stopping the run. But in an easy division, they still have a pretty tough schedule since they have to face the NFC West and the improving AFC East. So this is another watch and wait for me. I do lean over 9.5 wins on the season. They do have a tougher schedule this year, but I do think that they can hang in there with most teams. The three-headed monster of Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, and Julio Jones is going to be a problem. As long as they can stay healthy, that's going to be really tough to stop. Let's move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have had quite a few changes this offseason. Let's note this first. Since 2012, the Jags are 39-105 overall, and that's with 9 picks in the first round since 2012. Yowza. They were 1-6 in one-score games last season. Good old Gardner Minshew keeping them in a lot of games. Did really well, actually, at the end of a lot of games, but didn't finish the job. Can't win those close games. But with Trevor Lawrence, arguably the most hyped quarterback in the draft since Andrew Luck, is the future now. There's no doubt that Lawrence has every imaginable, tangible, and intangible necessary to succeed. Apparently, the guy has huge hands, 10-inch hands, whatever that means. That's great. He's obviously durable. He can get hit and get back up. Great size, 6'5", 213, big arm, accurate arm, leadership, intelligence. He's able to run the ball, not afraid to run the ball, not afraid to move around the pocket. And he says all the right things, right? He gets in front of the media, says all the right things. Great leader, great face of the Jaguars. And with Urban Meyer at the helm, it's going to be very interesting to see how this all pans out. They really cleaned house in front of management this offseason. The Jags got rid of general manager David Caldwell, now working for the Eagles. Obviously, head coach Doug Marrone is gone. Now a positional coach at Bama, which is interesting. Offensive coordinator Jay Gruden gone, unemployed. And defensive coordinator Todd Wash fired. Now position coach with the Lions. A lot going on, a lot of changes in this team this year. And the question, obviously, is can Urban Meyer turn it around? Can he transfer the college experience to the pros? It's a lot different. I don't love everything that I'm hearing from their camp as far as, the way that Urban Meyer looks at these players. I think he's looking at them more like kids and not pros. Of course, that's what he's used to. But it is a positive sign that they got rid of Tim Tebow. I mean, it doesn't take much to see that Tebow was undersized and just he's not a pro athlete. He's not a pro athlete anymore. It's over. It should be over. And a lot of people liked him. Whatever. He's a likable guy. I guess the girls like him. He's a good-looking guy. Good for you there, Timmy. But not a pro athlete anymore. So let's stop talking about that, please. But really, Shaq Griffin was the only good addition to their secondary that was really bad last year. So that's going to be a problem this year. And that's something that I'm really looking at. They allowed the highest success rate to opposing QBs. Their best position is probably the running back. James Robinson, most scrimmage yards of any undrafted rookie in NFL history. Pretty damn good first year with the Jags. And, of course, Travis Etienne, drafted in the first round as well. Teammate of Trevor Lawrence, so that could be a really deep and a really talented running back core. They also signed Carlos Hyde. I still think that an offensive lineman or more another pick for their secondary would have been a better first-round pick, but here we are. Some other draft acquisitions with high upside include cornerback Tyson Campbell, second round, offensive tackle Walker Little, also taken in the second round, and defensive tackle Jay Tufele. Particularly exciting high upside prospects. We'll see what happens there. Urban, after his first preseason game, was talking about increasing the tempo of their offense. I think that could be interesting. With Trevor Lawrence at the helm, quick passes to Etienne, and then James Robinson downhill running. That could really work. So we'll see what happens here. There's still a lot of questions. It all kind of rides on Urban and Trevor Lawrence. I'm not going to jump in the hype train too early here. 6.5 wins is a lot for a team with so many new additions and so many just new things going on. A quarterback, coach, front management, etc. I think they have 2 guaranteed wins against the Texans. Can they get to over 6 wins? I think they could. I would actually lean over, but I can't take the over. Just another lean for me. But I think this is a team, as long as Urban Meyer can translate into the NFL, this is a team that is developing. They are not that bad on defense. And if they get better on offense, really have better schemes, maybe higher tempo, throw teams off with some of the talent that they have. We need more from DJ Shark too, for sure. But if they can turn some things around on offense so that it's more consistent, this is a team that could shock a few other teams this year along the way. Especially if the opposing team is a little underwhelmed at their competition. I could see the Jags catching a few teams by surprise. Still not going to be a huge year. I don't think it's going to be like an Andrew Luck 11-5 first year kind of situation. But the Jags are a team finally on the up and up, I think. With that, let's move to the NFC South. All right, NFC South talk. Let's talk about those illustrious Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let me just read you this paragraph from Warren Sharp in his preview, which I think is really well said. In a year with a pandemic, a virtual offseason, and no preseason, a 43-year-old quarterback joined a new team and transitioned to a new offense for the first time in 20 years, injured his knee during unorganized offseason practices in the spring, which forced weekly attention during the season, and he didn't grasp the playbook until the final month of the season, and they won the GD Super Bowl. Okay, that last part Warren Sharp didn't say, but are you kidding me? This is the Tom Brady effect. Already one of the most stable franchises in the NFL, if you ask me. The Brady effect is real. The intangibles that he brings, obviously the presence on the field, the crisp passing, even at 43, 44 years old now. But the leadership, I talked about this a long time ago, the way that Brady was texting his teammates throughout Super Bowl week saying, we're going to win this, we're going to do this, we're going to win. Nonstop, right? He's constant. He's insane. He's probably a genius in that way. Just figures out physically, mentally, ways to get an advantage in football. And unbelievably, it's extremely scary knowing that the quarterback, Tom Brady, is back. And not only is he back, but something that no front office has ever been able to do before. All 22 starters on offense and defense that appeared in last year's Super Bowl will be on the team in 2021. That is a first in the NFL salary cap era. Unreal. And why should I expect that this year will be any different? Why should I expect that the Bucs won't again get deep into the playoffs at least and probably make another run at a Super Bowl, or at least be very challenging to stop on their way? They do have a considerably tough defensive schedule for the first half of this year. They got the Rams, Patriots, Dolphins, Colts, Washington football team in there. But overall, it's easier this year. NFC East, AFC East are their main opponents outside of their division. That is an easier schedule for sure. Of course, that big game coming up at Foxborough, that one should be interesting. They did pick up a good first round to replace Pierre-Paul probably next year, and Joe Tyron. DE, defensive end, linebacker switch up, has real high upside. We'll see what happens with him this year. Interesting choice when they took Kyle Trask in the draft. Pocket quarterback, but decent arm. Of course, that's what they said about Brady coming out of Michigan, so you never know. Added good depth with offensive tackle Ryan Hainsey from Notre Dame. But their defense returns just as vicious as ever, and to me, the main reason why they won that Super Bowl as far as the actual gameplay goes. Vita Vea, Ndamukong Suh, Devin White, Shaq Barrett, Levante David, the whole gang. They're coming back. A lot of sacks last year. There's just a lot to like about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers once again. An interesting note here, Tampa Bay led in only 7 games in the first half in 2020. So imagine with Brady knowing the playbook even better, no knee problems, a team that has a ton of chemistry, a ton of confidence now after winning a Super Bowl. And what if they get even more aggressive in the first half, take more first half leads, a little less running, which they really depended on in the first half of last season? Could be scary. Could be another scary performance by Tom Brady and another great team that he's a part of. It could be another Super Bowl winning team. And honestly, there are very few reasons to think that they're not going to be the winner of the NFC South. Which brings us to the New Orleans Saints, who are maybe one of the more interesting teams to look at this year. The post-Drew Brees era is upon us. Personally, I would love to see what Taysom Hill can do at quarterback. But either way, this is a very interesting team. I mean, Jameis Winston, fun guy to watch. He should have a much better scheme to work behind as a quarterback under Sean Payton, that's for sure. Few coaches in the NFL can claim to be better at developing players and scheming for his offense than Sean Payton. So we shall see. Whoever's at quarterback should be very interesting. But the Saints experienced a lot of losses this offseason. Emmanuel Sanders, Janoris Jenkins, Malcolm Brown, Quan Alexander, Trey Hendrickson off the edge, Josh Hill, and Jared Cook. Now they signed Nick Van Nett at tight end to replace them, and they signed an edge rusher too, but not too much was added in free agency. Now they still have one of the best offensive lines, and the combination of Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray is still one of the best in football. And of course, like I said, one of the best coaches in football under Sean Payton. He can make shit happen that a lot of quarterbacks can't. One of the biggest questions heading into the 2021 season is how they're going to handle turnovers now with Drew Brees gone. Amazingly, Drew Brees had 23 interceptions the last 4 seasons. The last time Jameis Winston was a starter at quarterback, he had 30 interceptions in 1 season. That's not good, right? But their defense causes a lot of turnovers. Drew Brees doesn't turn it over, so it should be really interesting. Some of their draft class, Ian Book apparently is impressing. I'm not going to really believe that until I see it. I'm a fan of Notre Dame and college football. I know. I saw a lot of flaws in his game. First round pick, defensive end Peyton Turner has a history of injuries, including a torn ACL. Inconsistent but high upside. And then linebacker Pete Warner Athletic, a little slow coming out of Ohio State, a little slow in the pass game, but very effective on blitzes, could add more depth behind that front seven, of course, with Cam Jordan and Marcus Davenport and others. But biggest challenges this year are going to be how to maintain efficiency on early downs. If they're passing less often and less consistency, they would pass a lot on first downs with Drew Brees at the helm. Executing well on third downs, obviously something Drew Brees, one of the most accurate passers in the history of the game, excelled at. And then minimizing sacks. Drew Brees has a way of sneaking around in that pocket and minimizing turnovers. What are they going to do this year with a turnover-prone quarterback in Jameis Winston and perhaps a defense that has a little less clout to it, a little less depth? So really tough to predict this team. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to say that they can compete with the Bucs, but I'm also not going to say that they're going to fall to the bottom of the NFC South. I don't have too much more to say about the Saints. This is an exciting team to watch, exciting team to try and figure out as the season goes on. But let's look at the Carolina Panthers now, who could make big moves this year. I think it's possible. All right, and you're going to hear a little click here, click, because I want to pull up this sheet that just really displays all the different moves that the Panthers have made this offseason. Key free agents and trades added. Sam Darnold, obviously. Sam Darnold getting a second shot away from Adam Gase, away from the Jets. I'm looking forward to that. Hassan Riddick, edge rusher. Cameron Irving, left guard. David Moore, wide receiver. Daquan Jones, inside defensive lineman. Left guard, Pat Eflin. Just a lot of additions to their team. Had a big draft. I think 11 draft picks total, if I'm counting correctly. They got cornerback J.C. Horn from South Carolina, real shutdown quarterback there out of South Carolina, although the Panthers run a lot of zone defense, and J.C. Horn really thrived in man-to-man, so that should be interesting. Terrace Marshall Jr., ton of upside in that guy. I'll talk a little bit more about him in a second. Brady Christensen, offensive tackle from BYU. Tight end Tommy Tremble from Notre Dame. Chuba Hubbard, Oklahoma State, running back. There's a lot of additions on this team. And they got rid of a few people too, but not really any names that should make a significant impact other than, obviously, Teddy Bridgewater gone. With Sam Darnold, I don't think that's a real concern. Mike Davis was such a hoss last year, so they don't really have a lot of depth left at running back. But hopefully Christian McCaffrey can stay healthy. And then Curtis Samuel is now gone, but Terrace Marshall Jr. could be the guy to replace him. Marshall was a 5-star recruit out of high school and played third, slot wide receiver, or just the third wide receiver at LSU. So hopefully he can replace Curtis Samuel. That could work out. Overall, the Panthers have a pretty stacked wide receiver core. So a lot of weapons there for Sam Darnold. And, of course, Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield as a pass-catching running back. Can't beat that. And the interesting thing is the Carolina offense was very efficient last year. Right? They weren't explosive, but they were efficient. A good ATS covering team just couldn't turn a lot of those games into wins. They were 3-8 in one-score games. So just lots of covers, not a lot of wins. Russell Okung, too, is a big loss at left tackle and has not been replaced well. So we'll see what happens there. But my take overall on the Panthers is all about Sam Darnold. It's all about Sam Darnold and Matt Rule. But principally Sam Darnold, can he succeed with a new team? The bottom line is the kid hasn't been given a fair shot. To me, Adam Gase was a joke. It was clear he had little to no personality, not a great leader. You got to have personality if you're going to be a leader. You got to have personality and be able to relate to your players if you're going to develop them. So he's surrounded by good offensive talent here and the coaching to succeed. In his last 3 seasons with the Jets, or in his 3 seasons with the Jets in total, he played behind offensive lines that ranked 32nd, 30th, and 14th in PFF's pass blocking efficiency. So mostly pretty terrible lines. And the Panthers' offensive line ranked 10th best in pass blocking efficiency last year. And obviously, as I mentioned before, with all the weapons, Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, now Terrace Marshall, and Christian McCaffrey, he's got the tools. He's got it at his fingertips. And Matt Rule is a defensive-minded coach. He's made that obvious. But I think he's going to give Sam Darnold a chance to be aggressive and to stretch the field. He's got the talent to be able to do so. I'm going to go with this being a breakout year for Sam Darnold and for Matt Rule as a coach. It's clear his players like him as a coach. They play for him. He focuses on defense, and their defense is always improving, it seems. They're going to be a tough out. They were a tough out all of last year. They should be even better this year. Sam Darnold, while doesn't have the experience of Teddy Bridgewater, can really stretch the field, has a bigger arm, and I think the kid still has a tremendous amount of upside. We don't really know what he can do yet because of his situation with the Jets. I'm going to go over 7.5 wins in the Panthers. I think they could take second place in the NFC South. That is, if the Falcons don't have something to do with it. So let's move right into the Falcons as I'm, again, over time here. We're at 36 minutes. I just can't shut up about football. I just can't shut up. But that's okay. The famous story about the Falcons, we all know it. They led in 9 out of their 16 games at halftime last year, and guess how many of those that they won? 4. Exactly 4. They lost 8 out of 10 one-score games. They blew 5 games with a lead at the 2-minute warning. Just incredible. Incredible how the Falcons find ways to lose games. And we know that they're still, even without Julio Jones, I believe they still will be, a great passing offense. They just have a lackluster defense and not a lot of a run game. And those are their limits. Now, new coach Arthur Smith comes in from Tennessee, brings in discipline, structure, obviously is a big part of that Titans offense becoming very explosive, centered around Derrick Henry and the development of Tannehill. And quite frankly, I'm not that concerned that the Falcons lost Julio Jones. I love Calvin Ridley. He's a little small, but he's efficient, a great route runner. Russell Gage is still developing. And Kyle Pitts, the highest drafted tight end in draft history, is a huge, very talented target to add to the already talented roster of playmakers on the Falcons. I'm not too worried. They also picked up Cordell Patterson, which, he's a good slot or fourth wide receiver, can make some plays, has the ability to return kicks and punts. So we'll see how they work him in there. Falcons also signed A.J. Terrell, a cornerback in the first round of 2020 that played a ton last year, and he's developing nicely. So maybe we'll see some improvements from them in their secondary, but their secondary overall is still pretty weak. They just don't have great depth on defense. Now, they drafted safety Richie Grant in the second round, cornerback Darren Hall in the fourth, cornerback Avery Williams in the sixth, and they should all have opportunities to compete for those positions because that's just how shallow the Falcons are. Obviously, Grady Jarrett's still there in the front seven, great pass rusher and run stopper, and they're hoping for more from Dante Fowler, who they got from the Rams last year and just kind of had an off year. So hopefully he performs up to expectations. What the Falcons do have working for them is they have the 21st most difficult schedule this year. It was the hardest by adjusted DVOA last year. That's adjusted defense efficiency rating. So they can at least expect some more success from their defense, but I don't know. I like Arthur Smith. I think he could be a good coach. I don't hate Matt Ryan. I think he's a dependable quarterback and has been for years. He can still really toss that pigskin. The jury is still out on this team, but I'm going to go with the under 7.5 wins just due to defensive depth, although I could see buy signs on this team in the future. A lot of development, a lot of young players, just a lot of room to improve. And obviously, if they have a down year, they could look for that big name at quarterback that could really turn this team around. Matt Ryan, solid quarterback, but not a quarterback. Looking back, Justin Fields would have been a very dynamic pick for this team. Could have really stretched the field as a runner and as a downfield passer. But maybe that's still in their future to get the quarterback they want. I mean, hopefully. Can't hang on to Matt Ryan for too much longer. But sorry, Falcons fans, I'm going to go with the under for the Falcons this year. I think we need one more year to kind of test out, improve, and develop. But I could see the Falcons, conceivably Tom Brady has to retire eventually. Once the NFC South gets a little more wide open, I could see this team really developing and turning around. I do believe in Arthur Smith as an offensive schemer. It's just they need a lot of help on defense. All right, 2 quick preseason picks that I'd like to give out. They're going to be premium picks for my premium customers. But since you're listening to this pod, and I am grateful, I like the Cowboys -4 this week against the Texans. The Cowboys have yet to win a preseason game. This is the second preseason game. I doubt that Dak will be out there. But like we saw in Hard Knocks, those backups are working for their position as the backup quarterbacks to Dak. So I like the Cowboys to get a win at home against the Texans. Interstate rivalry. There's some juice there. There's something to get motivated for. And the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy, I think they want some positive energy. So I expect them to show out and do a little more than the Texans can do. It's just a very weak roster over there at Houston. And I also like the Colts plus 2.5. I realize that Frank Reich has been open about not playing a lot of their starters, but they just have a ton of depth. And as we're seeing, they're pretty damn good at depth at quarterback as well. So I think that they can hang in the game. These preseason games could end in a tie. Who knows? But at plus 2.5 for a team with as much depth as the Colts, that's a pretty damn good bet to take, especially in the unpredictable preseason where we see a lot of dogs winning all the time. All right, let's wrap this puppy up. I guess it's good that I have the goal of 30 minutes for this podcast. Then at least we're like around the 40-minute mark. But we'll get better at that as we move forward. I guess I just love to hear myself talk, especially about football. Hey, football, it's coming. I keep talking about it. It's not here yet, but it is coming, everybody. Laying the points with FarleyBets. Appreciate you listening. Check us out at theoddsbreakers.com. Check out our winning handicappers at the Oddsbreakers. Check us out on Twitter. Follow us. Consider signing up for my premium picks, which are doing really well, as they usually are. And catch you next time, next week. More division previews, more preseason picks, and 1 week closer to the NFL season. Let's go!